Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. We're going to call the Malden School Committee meeting to order. Today is Thursday, October 10th, 2024. The time is 6:00 p.m. Our next meeting is scheduled for Monday, November 4th at 6 p.m. here in the chamber. A couple of notes before we begin. We have a few new faces here this evening. I would like to welcome our new school committee clerk, Ariana Langston, and I'm happy to say a former graduate of Malden High School, Malden resident, so welcome, truly. Also, as you probably have seen to my right, our Ward 3 school committee member and vice chair, the incomparable Jennifer Spadafora, could not attend, so we're graciously joined by our information technology director for the city, Anthony Rodriguez, who is going to step in for her to help administer tonight's meeting. We also are missing Michael Drummy and Elizabeth Horty from tonight. Elizabeth Horty is participating via Zoom, and so we will be roll calling every vote tonight. If everybody was in attendance, we wouldn't have to on certain items, but because we have a member on Zoom, we will be roll calling every vote. Couple of other notes from the docket. We're going to go in order tonight, and the docket consists of the minutes from September 9th, 2024. We'll then do public comment, which is an opportunity for members of the public to address the school committee. We only ask that you state your name and address for the record, and the allotted time will be 3 minutes. I think we'll allot overall 15 minutes, and then if we have to adjust, we'll do it then. From there, we're going to go to our school superintendent, who has 3 items listed under his report. One is where we are with the 2024 state accountability and MCAS results. He's then going to let us know where we are regarding student enrollment, and then finally, he will discuss entry plan reminders, town halls and listening sessions. Now from him, we're going to go to Ms. Rose Zeiberg under subcommittee reports. She's going to talk about what's been happening with policy and procedure. And then from there, we'll entertain 2 motions this evening. One is from the Policy and Procedure Subcommittee regarding the Early Learning Center enrollment policy. And then the second item will be a resolution, yes on question 2, MCAS graduation requirements, which I think you all know. That originally was going to be led by Ms. Spadafora, but in her absence, Mr. Bernard, who has co-sponsored that resolution, will lead the discussion. Then after that, everyone will take points of personal privilege, and then from there, we're going to entertain a motion to go into executive session. If voted accordingly, there are 4 items that we will be discussing in executive session. One is just the approval of the executive session minutes of September 9th. The second item will be to discuss Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 21, Subsection A1. And this is basically to discuss an open meeting law complaint dated August 20th, 2024, filed by Peter Ebb against the Malden School Committee. Then the third item is the school committee is going to discuss collective bargaining with the MEA regarding the following grievances. Grievance number 53 of school year 2022-2023. Grievance number 3 of school year 2023-2024. Grievance number 20 of school year 2023-2024. Grievance 2022 of school year 2023-2024. Grievance 24 of school year 2023-2024. And then finally, Division of Labor Relations docket number MUP-23-10045. Then from there, we're going to discuss strategy sessions in preparation for contract negotiations with non-union personnel, specifically the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. We'll then return from executive session where we may or may not act on some of the items discussed in executive session. And then from there, we will move adjournment. So are there any questions of the team? If not, what we always do at this juncture is pledge allegiance to our flag, and then we'll have a moment of silence for our vet. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence in honor of all those who have fought for our nation and continue to do so today. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're going to have our clerk take attendance to ensure that we have the required numbers needed to conduct tonight's meeting.
Mayor Christensen?
Here.
Mr. Drummy? Mr. McCarthy? Here. Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin? Here. Ms. Horty?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Bernard?
Here.
Ms. Rose Zeiberg? Here. Superintendent Zippel?
So we have a quorum sufficient to allow us to come together this evening. We'll now get into tonight's agenda. All right, everyone. So the first item is the approval of minutes. These are the regular session minutes of September 9th, 2024. There's been a motion made by Mr. Bernard. It's been seconded by Mr. McCarthy. Any questions on the minutes? Everybody's had a chance to look those over. Hearing none, we'll have our clerk call the roll.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummy? Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin?
Yes.
Ms. Horty?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Bernard?
Yes.
Ms. Rose Zeiberg?
Yes.
Okay, that carries unanimously. All right, let's drop down now to public comment. Again, this is an opportunity for anyone wishing to address the school committee can do so now. We only ask that you state your name and address for the record, and please keep your remarks to under 3 minutes. Public comment is now open.
Hi, Deb Gesualdo, President of the Malden Education Association, 77 Exchange Street here in Malden. I first want to thank everybody who has co-sponsored the resolution in support of Yes on 2, which would eliminate the 10th grade graduation requirement for MCAS. Really appreciative of that. I just want to make sure that people who are watching and learning a bit about this know that question 2 would not eliminate MCAS testing. It would just eliminate the graduation requirement for it. This kind of standardized testing really puts a lot of our students at a disadvantage, particularly students who are economically disadvantaged, students who are housing insecure, students who are unhoused, students who are newcomers to our country and do not speak English as a first language, students who are on IEPs, and it basically measures a student's socioeconomic status and their demographics. And it is not a picture of who and what a student is as a whole academic being. It was meant always to be a diagnostic tool and has moved really far away from being that. And I think removing the graduation requirement actually is going to pull it back into being more of what it was meant to be, and also leveling the playing field to where it should be for all students, because all students are important, not just middle-class white students who are born in the United States. So thank you to all who co-sponsored it, and I urge a yes vote on this resolution.
All right, anybody else wishing to address the school committee can can do so now. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor Christensen. Good evening, school committee members. My name is Nikita Lamour. I live in 645 Cross Street. I'm here to address the practice of the African proverb, it takes a village to raise a child. I truly believe this. It takes a village to raise children. And the village includes community stakeholders. These stakeholders are part of the community, and I'm here to ask for their involvement. They need your help and your leadership to be actively engaged in the education of our Black and immigrant children. As a Black professional and a Black immigrant, I've experienced firsthand the challenges our community faces. Phrases like the school-to-prison pipeline or achievement gap are not just words. They represent my realities. I live with them. I don't know a Black person who doesn't have a close family member affected by the justice system. Given these circumstances and the cultural demographics we are dealing with in our district, I'm imploring you to start meaningful conversations with community leaders in their languages and from their perspectives. The village isn't just about translation or interpretation. It's about using the people who understand the language, the culture, and the community to effectively communicate with them. As an educator, I'm calling on you to engage with the stakeholders, to teach them about the school curriculum and cultural context that the schools are functioning within, and to share their expectations. They, the stakeholders in turn, can pass this knowledge to the parents, and it will trickle down to the children, and of course will have positive influence in our community. Many parents don't know or don't see what's happening in the schools. They bring their kids to school and expect us as educators, as leaders, to handle everything. Parental involvement is foreign to those parents. In some cultures like mine, authority figures make all the decisions, but that's not the case here. And the parents that know that, they need the stakeholders to tell them. We need those in positions of authority to identify the Black stakeholders and call upon community leaders and engage them. By doing this, the leaders can be involved with the families, and everyone can work together to improve the future of our society.
Okay, Ms. Lamour, you're at 3 minutes, so are you wrapping up?
Okay, all I want to say, for 40 years when I first started teaching in another district, I've been talking about bringing the community leaders in the dialogue. So that started, for those of us who are older, since the boat people phenomenon. So I have that in 1984. I've started bringing those, the idea of community outreach. So I'm imploring you to please call out to especially the Black leaders, to reach out to the stakeholders and help them get involved in the school process.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Anybody else wishing to address the school committee can do so now. All right, seeing no one else, we're going to close that portion of the meeting. Now let's go to our school superintendent.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, and those in the public. Thank you. Pleased to share with you a report on three items tonight. First of all, the state released the 2024 Accountability and Massachusetts Comprehensive Assessment System results late last month, and we want to review highlights of that, those results with all of you. And that'll be the bulk of our presentation tonight. We have our enrollment snapshot, just so you know where we are with our enrollment across the schools in the district, and then just want to give you a brief update on our entry plan. For the 2024 accountability results and our MCAS scores also, just want to invite our Assistant Superintendent, Kamal Basim, up for that portion. And I want to thank all of our school principals for being in the audience tonight, and all of our curriculum directors as well, among others, who have been working together to analyze these results and working with their teachers and educators to analyze the results as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Basim. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, and thank you so much for the opportunity to address you today. As you likely know, in late September, the Department of Education released our MCAS scores and accountability data from the 2023-24 school year. So before I begin, I would like to contextualize this data release. This data is important for us to understand and share publicly, but it doesn't tell the whole story of the Malden Public Schools. Right? It doesn't tell us about our engaged community, our committed and hardworking educators, the amazing students and families, the relationships between educators and students, the resilience and cultural richness of our students, or the music, arts, and enrichment and athletic successes that our students experience. So that's really important context to remember as we think that these are all parts of a comprehensive educational system. And the data does tell a part of the story, one that's important for us to reflect on, as we see how our students performed on a common assessment taken by their peers across the state. And because we have this data, it's important for us to engage with it to elevate the strengths that it shows and to embrace the growth that it illuminates so we can continue to improve our ability to do right by all of our students. So today's presentation should show you an overview of what data we have available, the trends in Malden's data, and some high-level next steps that we're taking as a district. So what data is measured by the accountability system? We might be wondering, what are all the pieces of this comprehensive package? Well, there's a number of components. The first two are the ones that are likely the most intuitive. The MCAS achievement score is the percent of students that are achieving a passing score on the MCAS exam. Previously, this was known as the percent proficient, so you may have heard that language, but in the release, they refer to this as the percent of students who achieve a meeting expectation score or an exceeding expectation score. Students also receive a growth score, referred to as student growth percentile, which we'll reflect on today. The accountability system also takes into account other factors besides MCAS. So for example, we see our access scores. This is performance on an assessment that is given to our English learners that measures their progress in becoming fluent English speakers. In addition, they look at data such as chronic absenteeism. And for high schools, additional indicators including our graduation rate, advanced coursework, and re-engagement of students. So today, we'll reflect on some of these pieces, the academic indicators, MCAS achievement, MCAS growth, and the access scores. But all of these indicators are taken into account by the Department of Education when they calculate our accountability classification. So that if you can imagine, they take all those pieces together, they sort of create a ranked list of districts across the state, and they classify us in terms of whether we're in need of intervention. So you might be wondering, how did we do? I'll start with the first, the accountability classification, and then I'll go into some of the academic indicators. As I mentioned before, the accountability classification is determined by taking our point total on all of the indicators I referred to on the prior chart, right? MCAS, growth, access, attendance from last year and this year, putting it into a total score and comparing it to all the districts in the state. So they lay us out from highest to lowest, right? And then they give a classification. So the bottom 10th percentile, as you can see here, are referred to as requiring assistance or intervention. Then for districts outside of the bottom 10th percentile, they're classified by these indicators here. So limited or no progress, moderate progress, substantial progress, or meeting or exceeding targets. So the good news is that none of our schools are ranking in the bottom 10th percentile, and actually all of our schools in Malden are classified as either moderate progress towards targets or substantial progress towards targets. And so as a district overall, our classification is here as substantial progress towards our pre-pandemic levels of achievement. Of course, we hold ourselves to a higher standard than the state does, and we're always seeking to improve outcomes for students. But in terms of the state classification, this is good news, since historically, Malden has previously been classified as needing assistance or intervention. So that's the overall classification. How do we do on the other indicators that went into this classification? I'll start by looking specifically at our English language arts scores on the MCAS. So in this graph here on the left, you can see their performance of students in grades 3 through 8 who took the English language arts MCAS. So these blue bars towards the middle show our percent of students passing the test. So that's our percent meeting exceeding. And you can see each of the bars represents progress over time. So you can see from 2019, 2022, 2023, 2024. The yellow line shows the average of what we call our peer districts. So the Department of Education has a tool where they allow us to identify districts as comparable to ours, based on size and demographics. So in this presentation, we'll show you the average of some of the districts from that peer group. So that refers to Brockton, Chelsea, Everett, Lowell, Lynn, Revere, and Waltham. And so consistently, we can see how we did compared to that average. And then the red line shows the state average over that time period. So let's look at Malden's English language arts results. What you can see here is that the state trend, as reported by the Department of Ed, shows a slight drop since last year in elementary school English language arts performance. Similarly for Malden, we also saw a slight drop from 36% meeting expectations to 34% meeting expectations. So that's a 2% drop. So how do you think about a 2% drop in scores? According to the Department of Education, a meaningful change is 2 to 3%. Anything lower than that, you sort of consider flat performance. Right, so this is right on the edge of flat performance. You might consider it sort of borderline flat or a slight drop. Our performance is below the state average, but it's worth noting that it is higher than the performance of our peer districts. At the high school level, we see the same performance from last year to this year, 51% of our students meeting or exceeding. The state also had consistent performance from last year at the secondary level. At the high school level, we also continue to perform higher than our comparable peers. What's interesting here is that in high school English language arts, this is one of the few grade levels where we are actually slightly above our pre-pandemic scores. We had 47% of students meeting or exceeding in 2019. Though our performance has been pretty consistent from year to year since then, and I think ideally we'd like to see it increasing every year to close the gap with the state. So the question is, as we look across grade levels, can we look to see not just who is passing the test, but whether we're growing, right, and getting better each year? So that's why we look at an additional indicator, which is student growth performance. So with this indicator, the state looks at students compared to how they performed last year. And they determine if compared to students who scored the same as them, they're making low growth, typical growth, or high growth. So you can imagine the reason we look at this is maybe there's a student who isn't yet passing the MCAS exam, but if they have high growth, we know that they're on track, right, to pass the test in future years. So in these graphs, you see the blue bars are Malden's growth over SGP over time, student growth percentile, and the red bar is the state average, which is set at 50th percentile. Anything that is below 40 is classified as low growth. Typical growth is between 40 and 60, and above 60 is considered high growth. So you can see that in both elementary and high school, our students are making typical growth, with higher growth in the elementary school side. So how do we think about changes in SGP for student growth percentile from year to year? Remember, with MCAS achievement, we thought like more than 2% is a meaningful change. With student growth percentile, we don't really get into 1 percentile, 2 percentile, 3 percentile change. What we're looking is directional shifts. And what we want to see is students, if our percentile is changing from the low growth to typical growth to high growth. So what we see here is that in elementary school, you see that we're shifting, still in typical growth, but shifting in a positive direction towards the high end. And in high school, we're still on the low end of typical growth. So we've talked a bit about overall performance, we've talked a bit about growth, but as we know, the performance of specific groups of students can get lost when we just look at the average. So that's why we want to look at an additional way to slice this data by looking at demographic trends. So here you see a graph that shows the performance of specific populations of students in Malden over time. So as you can see, the clusters here represent a specific population of students. So you can see students with disabilities, English learners, low-income students, and then students broken down by racial groups. And then each color represents a different year. So within the sort of demographic cluster, you can see the 4-year trend. Is it trending down? Is it trending up? Is it staying the same? So what you see here is that overall, if you recall, our English language arts achievement was around 34% passing in elementary school. So you can see that we have some work with some of our specific populations to support reaching pre-pandemic achievement, but also closing of opportunity gaps, right, compared to the average. The trend that we see here in performance is that consistent with statewide trends, all of our specific populations of students in elementary school had either flat performance, so consistent from prior years, in the case of English learners, Black and Asian students, or slightly decreased performance from last year in elementary school. In high school, the trends are more variable. You can see that our Black students actually had an increase in performance, while other groups stayed more flat from last year. And our Asian and our Hispanic students had a slight decrease. So overall in English language arts, our performance is consistent with statewide trends, with either flat or small dips in performance and typical growth overall, with our overall passing scores well above that of our peer districts. So how do we do in math? Let's look first at how the state did for context. That's the red line on this graph. So in elementary school, the state has held pretty steady for the past few years, with an average meeting or exceeding percent of 41% last year and this year. Our peer districts, also in yellow, have had very flat performance for the past 3 years. So in contrast, Malden has some very good news to report. In grades 3 through 8, we had a 4% increase in meeting or exceeding percentages, from 23 to 27% this year, which closes a gap with our pre-pandemic scores and the state average. Remember, a meaningful increase from year to year is around 2%, right? So this is a very significant change, an improvement, and it's driven by some very strong jumps in 3rd, 4th, and 8th grade scores. So we're very excited to celebrate that. At the high school level, our performance decreased about 4% meeting exceeding from last year, and the state had about 2% drop. We're still performing well above the average of our peer districts. So as you might imagine, the huge jumps in performance in grades 4 through 8 were achieved through a higher than usual growth score for us, right? Students are doing better, so as you imagine, they're growing more. And again, remember, it's not as meaningful to think, did we go up a percentile with our student growth percentile? But in this case, it is meaningful to think about the change that we're seeing, the directional shift from time to time. And what we see here is that we've moved from, in 2023, being sort of close to that typical growth line, right, the state average of around 50, and we've moved pretty considerably towards the high growth area on the graph. And as a district, we didn't quite hit over 60, right, getting into that high growth range, but we actually did exceed that in some of our grade levels in 6th and 7th grade. So you can see really strong progress towards the high end of typical growth. And so that's very good news. In high school math, our student growth percentile was in the high 30s, which is considered low growth. So again, in addition to looking at aggregate performance, we also want to look at the performance of specific demographic groups to see if we're widening or closing opportunity gaps within the district. In 3rd through 8th grade math, we see some very good news. So for most of our student groups, we see huge gains towards our overall percent of students meeting or exceeding. So our English learners, our low-income students, our Black students, our Hispanic and Latino students, our Asian students, and our white students all made gains from last year. Our students with disabilities performance was consistent from last year, So we have some opportunity to consider what worked well in reaching other student groups and how we can extend that. In high school, the performance of our specific groups in math was more variable and more similar to the statewide trends, which were variable as well. All of our student groups stayed flat in performance from last year or dropped slightly, although our students with disabilities actually increased their performance from last year. So we have a really interesting opportunity here to share practices in math across our grade spans to consider what our elementary schools and high schools can learn from each other, or high school can learn from each other. We have less data about our science performance. Students take science exam in grades 5, 8, and high school, and because they don't test in consecutive years, we don't have a growth percentile for them. So we can look at our science achievement. What you see here is that the state average is pretty consistent from the last few years, and so is ours, both in elementary and high school. You can also note that we are performing above the performance of our comparable or peer districts. So we've talked today about MCAS data and growth. Another assessment that our students take that is weighed heavily in the system is our access exam. So the access exam is given to our students actually at a different time of year from the MCAS. It's administered in January. And this gives us information on the percent of English learners who are making progress towards becoming fluent English speakers. So students are tested in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And they're not just tested in basic conversational skills, but whether they can use those English skills in all content areas. So really, as a district, we share responsibility across all content areas and grade levels for our student results on this test, as it really measures whether they're supporting students, we are supporting students to engage in that content learning all day. And so how is fluency in English measured? If any of us have experiences learning another language, the research confirms what many of us have experienced anecdotally, that it takes about 6 years to become fully fluent in a language. And so based on that research, the access exam actually provides a progress target for every student that is completely individualized. So it's based on how many years that student has been learning English, right? And how many years they've been in the country, whether they were born here, been here their whole lives, or may have just arrived. And so based on that individualized progress target, on access, we get the district gets reported information about what percent of students are meeting that target. And so that's reported as our progress towards attaining English language proficiency, the percent of students making progress. So as you can see here, we have some sobering news to report. The different colors show the different grade spans. So blue is grades 1 through 5, red is grades 6 through 8, and yellow is grades 9 through 12. And then the clusters are each year. So what you can see here, right, is that our percent making progress has been decreasing across the grade spans. And you can also see that this is, or we don't see it in the graph, but we can report that this is actually below the state average in the accountability system. Our district was awarded 1 out of 4 possible points here, reflecting that we had drops in performance from last year. So this is really important for us to examine closely as we consider our priorities and our area of focus for this year. So that was a lot of information, but by way of a quick summary, here are the trends that we just discussed. So in English language arts, our results showed a slight decline in 3 through 8 and stayed flat in high school. In math, our 3 through 8 performance and growth increased meaningfully, though dropped slightly in high school. In science, our performance stayed flat. Our specific group performance was variable in English language arts, slight increase in math, and in most cases, our students are making typical growth compared to the state. In terms of whether our English learners are progressing in their mastery of the English language, we report that fewer students made progress last year than in prior years across our district, and that the state awarded us 1 out of 4 possible points for meeting targets in this area, and a particular area of focus for us is elementary school. So this data tells us very important information, but what's even more important is what we plan to do about it. So before concluding this presentation, I'll give a brief context about the work across the district to address the trends that we have shared. So at a high level, our focus is providing educators with the resources they need to address the needs of specific populations of students in all content areas. So at each school, teams have analyzed this data and developed professional learning plans for the year. And in most of our schools, these are focused specifically on the needs of our multilingual learners and our students with disabilities. We've also invested in professional learning partnerships across the districts with two particular DESE literacy grants, and we're working with an organization called TNTP to support curriculum implementation in English language arts. You can see here a picture of some of our English language arts educators in a workshop co-led by TNTP and our district staff on one of our professional development days. In addition, in our K-8 schools, we've begun daily small group data-informed intervention through the use of staff we call literacy and math assistants. We're also making some shifts in practice this year in response to the data. We're placing a huge focus on meeting the needs of our specific populations. So part of our required service delivery is that our English learners get specific support in English language development, and we've invested in a new curriculum and training on it for this. It's called English 3D, and we want to celebrate our ESL teachers for their use of this resource. We're also working across all content areas to share our responsibility for the development of our English learners. And so we're providing support to educators to this end. So for example, our November district-wide professional development day will focus specifically on meeting the needs of our multilingual learners and our students with disabilities. We're doing work across the district with our principals, APs, and central office team to address the trends we see in this data. We're meeting monthly with a key instructional focus and having discussions on streamlining tools, partnerships, and greater alignment across schools. And no plan to address trends in data could be complete without hearing what our community thinks. And through the superintendent's entry plan and listening sessions across schools, we are finding really valuable the opportunity to elevate educator voice as well as family and in some cases student voice. So what I hope we take away from this analysis is that as a district, we have deep respect for the hard work of our educators. We're excited to celebrate the progress that we have seen, and we're strongly committed to leaning into the areas of growth to do right by all kids. So I thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight, and we'll hand the time back to the superintendent.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent Bassin. And before we invite questions, just wanted to share information about our enrollment. We, as of August 29, we had enrolled in the district 6,261 students total. And then you can see the enrollment by school and the enrollment by grade level. When we got to October 1st, that number had increased to 6,472. And this is still a tentative count because we have a handful of students who may not have shown or whose enrollment may have changed just prior to this, but we didn't have a notification from their new district where they were actually enrolled. And so by October 23rd, we'll have a final certification of the October 1st enrollment, but this is really close. And we'll have an updated total for you at the next meeting. And for context, the enrollment last year, October 1st, was 6,393. So we're a little bit higher than last year's enrollment. And then lastly, I just want to give an update on our entry plan, my entry plan. We've had a wonderful engagement with parents at 3 different schools now. BB School, Salem Wood, and then last night at Linden STEAM Academy. And in each of those cases, parents, I've just introduced myself to them, but then more importantly, spent the bulk of the time asking them to share what they love about our district, what things they think we urgently need to improve in our district, and then what our district should look like in 5 to 10 years if it were everything they wanted it to be. And the input that we've been collecting has been really, really heartfelt. And as we visit all 7 schools, we'll have the opportunity to analyze all of that input, and I'll come back to you later as we get into winter with a summary of all that we've learned from them. And I've also been meeting with the teachers and staff at each of the schools as well, and asking these same questions. And the participation has been very, very good. We still have 5 town hall meetings remaining for parents and caregivers and community members. And they will be at Forestdale School next Wednesday, Malden High School on the 24th. These are a little bit out of order, sorry about that. Ferryway on the 23rd, Early Learning Center on the 29th, and we have a special session with the Special Education Parent Advisory Committee at Salemwood on the 30th. And I just want to note that we do have live interpretation in our major languages, including Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, and we've had Mandarin also. And last night, I'll just share, there were parents. It was a parent who stood and gave a very, very impassioned, just shared a very heartfelt thanks, but also very heartfelt belief in how important schooling is, and ideas on how to better engage parents. And she shared the entire, her entire talk in Haitian Creole. And then the interpreter was there to translate on her behalf. And it was quite remarkable. And we had the same thing at other schools with parents sharing in Portuguese, and then the interpreter able to interpret and translate for them, so that they were actively involved in the session and not just hearing what was going on. And so we'll have those services along with childcare and cookies at each town hall. So all of them, I realize the time is not there, all of them, with the exception of the Early Learning Center, all of these meetings will be 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And the Early Learning Center will be 5 to 7 p.m. And so just really want to encourage, we'll be getting the word out, encouraging parents to take advantage of these opportunities to give input. And with that, we'll then turn it over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. For questions of the members? Any questions of the members? Let's first go to Ms. Horty.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Can you hear me?
Can you turn up the volume? Yep.
I wanted to thank all the teachers for all their hard work, and the curriculum leaders and all the folks in administration helping to drive the curriculum and get our students where they need to be in terms of MCAS testing. I did have a question for you. I think Ms. Basine, I think you might be the best person to answer this. And I also think that this is important for families to know, because I have an understanding of this, and I don't know if this is entirely accurate, but you had mentioned chronic absenteeism. My understanding about, as part of the whole picture of student growth, development, accountability, the district score, those sorts of things. I just want to clarify something with you, because my understanding is that chronic absenteeism means that if a student is absent 18 times, that they are chronically absent. Now, the other piece I understand from that is that the state does not take into account whether it is an excused absence, a doctor's note, a hospital admission, like it's just 18 absences. I'm wondering if you can confirm that for me.
Ms. Horty, I think I can confirm that. So it's not necessarily 18 absences, but 10% of days that they were enrolled.
Right. So if a student's there the whole year, it's 18 absences.
Correct.
Okay.
And you are correct that the reason for the absence is not taken into account. If they're absent for that many days, then they are considered chronically absent.
I just wanted to make that clear, because I know that in past meetings, I believe it was I believe it was towards the end of last school year, we discussed at length about excused absences and things like that. And I just wanted to clarify that that's fine for us as a district to know that it's an excused absence and we have our own policies, but know that the state does look at that differently than we do. So we might just want to consider that as part of the whole picture, and as well, not that anyone ever keeps their child out of school for reasons that aren't important, but just sort of as a heads up to everyone to know that that is an issue in all districts, not just ours, I'm sure. Thank you. I give my time back.
Thank you.
Ms. Hardy, I just wanted to mention for you and for the entire committee that at next month's meeting in November, we plan to discuss the chronic absenteeism and the other accountability factors in more detail. And we'll have people here who can speak to the actions that are being taken to address those concerns as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Over to Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully this will be a quick one. On many of the charts, there was a stat that said n equals and a number. Could I get a clarification? Does that represent the number of students? Yes.
Yes, Mr. Gray, that number represents the number of students in 2024 in each of those groups. So in this particular graph that Ms. Bassine is displaying here, this is showing specific group performance in math for grade 10, and the number at the bottom are the number of students in grade 10 in each of those groups who were tested.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Building on Mr. Gray's question, let me think how to phrase this. Students not taking the exam, is that factored in here as well?
So the participation rate is
Yes.
something that is reported by the state. That is not, I don't believe that's a factor in the accountability calculation. Is that right, Ms. Bassine? Feel free to come back, please.
Sure. The numbers here reflect the number of students who took the exam.
Right.
The state requires that, or the state will note that we maintain a participation rate of 95% or above. So it would flag if we had a lower participation rate, and we've not been flagged in any areas. So this is a vast majority of our students.
Okay. For next month, I'd be curious too on the positives that were accentuated here. Do they tie back to the curriculum changes that have been made in recent years? Would you be able to speak to that, or?
Ms. Bassine, do you want to?
Yes, I mean, first of all, the positive changes reflect the hard work of our students and our teachers. So first, and all of our educators across the Malden Public Schools and our partnerships with our families. So I'll say that first. I think when we speak to, our principals and our educators, we are seeing, one of the factors contributing to some of the positive shifts is the curriculum. But obviously it is the implementation of the curriculum in a manner that supports the needs of our students. So we are seeing, you would expect to see, the Department of Education says, 3 to 5 years after implementation of a curriculum, you start to see the boost in results. And that is around the timing of the implementation of our elementary math program. So we are seeing that and are excited to see those positive trends.
Got it. Thank you. Let's see, over to Ms. Rose Zeiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick question on the enrollment piece, and I noticed on some of them it says services only. If you can pull it over, and just wanted to see, especially for like the ELC enrollment, and just to go over what that means. Is it the CPPI grant type program? Because I noticed it in other grades too, higher. If you can see, we have there in grade 2. There's a couple sprinkled through.
Right. So, I'm sorry.
No, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. So services only. Those students are not actually included in our enrollment count for the purposes of state funding. But we do. These are students who live in Malden and who we are serving who are not in one of our schools, who are getting special education services from the district.
All set, Ms. Rosak? Over to Ms. Macklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I was just wondering, I know that with access, there were fewer students making progress, and that's concerning for me. And I'm just wondering, including these students and maybe across the district, are we identifying these students who need additional supports? And are there additional supports available? Or is that only with a 504 or an IEP?
So I'll certainly ask Ms. Pacine to add to what I have to share, but Ms. Macklin, thank you for the question. And we are committed to the success of all of our students who are multilingual. And these are not students necessarily who have a 504 plan or who have an IEP. In fact, the vast majority of them do not have either of those, but they are identified as being an English learner based on their initial screening or access score when they first enroll in the district. And they all receive English language development or English as a second language instruction through various models in elementary and middle school and high school, and from teachers who are licensed for that purpose and who are being trained to deliver English language instruction according to their level and according to their grade level in each class. Some students are grouped together in a class for their specific English language development levels. Others are pulled out and they see an English as a second language teacher in a separate setting. In some cases, English as a second language teachers push in or to teach alongside the general education teacher. We have various models in our high school. Students typically, depending on their level, will attend an English as a second language class for either 2 or 1 period based on their need. And they're again grouped based on their proficiency level in English. So all of that's happening already, and our commitment is to make sure that all of the models that we're implementing, that they're effective and that students are growing in their English development.
So these are, have you implemented anything new this year as opposed to what we've been doing in the past? Because if we're not making the mark, I would think that we would need to implement other ideas or have other supports available.
So we're fortunate. We have our director of multilingual education, Carmen Levisay, is with us for the 2nd year, and we have our assistant superintendent, Ms. Pacine, who actually had responsibility at the state level for overseeing language acquisition for English learners. Do you want to just comment briefly?
Thank you. And huge credit goes to the team last year, led by Ms. Levisay, to make sure that we're really leaning into this area for growth. 2 specific things I can point to this year. In that time that the superintendent referred to, where students are getting specific instruction targeted at their English language development, with significant educator input, we've actually adopted a curriculum that has evidence base around growing language acquisition for some of our students, particularly those in the earlier stages of language acquisition. So we're excited about that this year and are seeing some positive feedback from our educators around that support. The second piece is that students who are English learners and our multilingual students throughout the day should be receiving sheltered content instruction. And so part of the implementation of the curriculum that we have in English language arts, in math, in science, in social studies, right, we want to make sure that we are providing support to our educators in how to shelter that instruction for our multilingual students. And that's a real focus this year for our district-wide professional learning. So for example, on November 5th, all of our educators will be coming together, and our agenda for the day really focuses in on looking at specific rosters of students, looking at their specific language acquisition, and considering specific strategies we can use to support their growth in that content, right, while they're learning that content, and also their growth in learning language. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. All right, seeing no other lights, thank you. We'll now move on to subcommittee reports and discussions. Ms. Rose Zeiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pretty brief report out from our Policy and Procedure Subcommittee. So we met on September 30th, and Ms. Macklin, Mr. Bernard, Mr. McCarthy, and myself, we were in attendance along with Assistant Superintendent McDonald and Superintendent Sippel. And this was the ongoing discussion about creating a new policy that would be to create an ELC enrollment policy, which we did. It's gone through various formats and a lot of feedback. We've been working, started over the summer and have been working on it since then. So it's been reviewed and gone through various channels that it needs to be, to fit in. And so we actually took a vote and it came out unanimous that we did vote out favorably on the policy. Let me get the whole name of it. JFE4, Preschool Early Learning Center, Admission of Children of School Department Personnel. And so that was voted out favorably to present to the full committee.
All right, let's segue right to it. So the item under motions and resolutions is what the chair just described. So you want to make that motion to approve?
Yes.
And it's been seconded by Ms. Macklin. Everybody clear? Everybody's had a chance to look it over? When would this take effect? Is there an effective date or just?
We didn't put an effective date. Could be today. We're ready to
Yeah,
go.
just effective
Yeah.
immediately? Okay. All right, everybody ready? Let's call the roll.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummy? Mr. McCarthy? Yes. Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin?
Yes.
Ms. Horty?
Yes.
Mr. Gray? Yes. Mr. Bernard? Yes. Ms. Rose Zeiberg?
Yes.
Okay, very good. That carries unanimously. Thank you. Now, the other item under motions is yes on question 2. Mr. Bernard will lead the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm honored that I want to go and thank Ms. Spadafora first for going and putting this resolution forward, and I want to thank her also for going and asking me, since she was not going to be available, to go and put this forth. I'm a strong believer in this. I agree that the MCAS is kind of an unfortunate barrier to some kids graduating, and I think that given people's, we need to go and look at it more as a measure of how a student is doing, and not as a hurdle to go and jump over. And as we've seen, if we have a kid in 10th grade that's having, difficulties with understanding English and reading those questions, we have students that, when we're coming out of the pandemic, might be going and having some educational concerns and some anxiety. We've certainly heard through the years that, from various people, the level of anxiety that it brings, not just the students, but also the teachers, the administration, our network personnel, to make sure that everything runs and that we're not going to go and have it drop out. And eventually, I'd like to go and see this go and not get so tied to our funding as well, because I think that it's kind of an unfair process. I'd love to go and see a breakdown at some time of MCAS versus budget and see, whether we've got people, school districts out there that have the resources and are their MCAS scores going to automatically go and just show higher or not. I'd like to go and call for us to go and vote a yes on this. Would you like me to read this into the record or no?
Any need to read it? You've all read it. I think we're good, Mr. Bernard.
Okay.
So questions on what was presented to you? Let's go to Mr. Gray. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be abstaining from this vote. Since there is no legal requirement or need to publicize how I will vote on any item on the impending state and federal ballot, I will abstain with no further comment.
Okay, anybody else wishing to speak on the matter? Just a question from the chair. I'm going to be voting yes, but I am most interested on where we go from here. Let's say the question were to pass. Any sense of what happens from there?
From what I understand, and I've had conversations with our senators, Senator Jason Lewis, and he understands that we need to go and have, the concern I think is that we want to go and make sure we have a statewide standard for graduation, because every municipality can go and do that, and the MCAS and making that score as part of that was a weak attempt to do that statewide. We want to go and actually go in, or he was saying that he actually wants to go in and work on getting a set of standards across the state that are not tied into performance testing. And I think that we would want to go and make sure that we're, you know, the students of Malden will get rated on the same thing as students in Ashburnham, that'll get rated as the students in Worcester or Wellesley, and that way we know that, you know, we already have, Massachusetts has a record of being really great on education. We want to keep those standards high and just make sure that, you know, we can go and we can say that it doesn't matter where you go to school in Massachusetts, though you should get educated in Malden. But that being said, you're going to get the same great education no matter where you are.
Got it. Superintendent, we should make a note, depending on what happens with the question, to have some type of forum with the district about where we go from here. We may not know right away, but probably should let, you know, the district know what's next. Do you want to, are you already thinking that, I presume?
No, I agree.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other questions? If not, let's have the clerk call the roll. Let me get you one. Hold on 1 second. Can you hit the button and I'll...
Mayor Christensen?
Yes. Oh, wait. 1 second. Yes.
Mr. Drummey? Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin? Yes. Ms. Horty? Ms. Horty?
Yeah. Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Abstain.
Mr. Bernard?
Yes.
Ms. Rose Zeiberg? Yes.
Okay, that carries with 1 abstention. Now we're going to take points of personal privilege, left to right. Mr. Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to let everyone know we will be having our annual Ward 6 Halloween. This year it will take place Sunday, October 27th at the Salemwood School Gym from noon till 3 p.m. We will have entertainers, costume contest, games, food, and raffles. So please bring your kids, bring some fun, and enjoy the Halloween season. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Over to Mr. Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 3 quick announcements for the Salemwood. On this next Monday, no school. On Thursday, October 17th at 6 p.m., there's going to be a Title I family event. I'm assuming that's in the K-4 Cafe at Salemwood. And then on the 25th of October from 6 to 7:30, there'll be the K-4 Ball Feast Friday. I had to go and pronounce that very slowly. I also want to take 1 second and just state that I want to go and thank, I got a few calls from a certain class from Emerson, going and asking, doing some reporting. I want to go and welcome them to the meeting and hope that you go and you report us in good stead, and thank you for spending time with us tonight.
Great. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bernard. Ms. Macklin.
Oh, thank you. Just a couple of announcements from the ELC and the high schools. So the ELC, Malden ELC will have a fall festival, and I do have a flyer. Friday, October 18th from 5 to 7, all families and staff are welcome to attend. Please RSVP by October 16th. Flyers are in your child's backpack. Additionally, the Malden ELC PTO is looking to recruit families to join the PTO. You can sign up at the Fall Festival or contact the PTO via email or on Facebook. And from our high school, congratulations to the class of 2025 who hosted last week's homecoming events, culminating with over 400 students attending the homecoming dance. Malden High School will be participating in a Get Ahead Day on October 16th. Grade 9 students will participate in the Freshman Olympics. Grades 10 and 11 will take the PSAT, as the 12th graders will take the SATs. And that is it.
Thank you. Over to Ms. Rose Zeiberg, and then we'll go to Ms. Horty.
Thank you. For Linden events tomorrow, they are halfway through their online fundraiser, the Tiger Trot, and they will have an event, so it's tomorrow night, 5:30 to 6. There's a parade, and students can come with costumes or spirit wear, and then the party that follows is 6 to 8 o'clock, and that fundraiser then continues through October 27th. The week of October 28th through the 1st is a book fair, which will be in the library, and they are looking for volunteers to help out with that. November 9th, they're looking at a craft fair, which will be from 1 to 4. There's a mix of outside and student vendors. And on November 26th, there are parent-teacher conferences at 5:30, but before that, from 4:30 to 5:30, parents can attend a Boston versus Bullies program. That program that they brought into the school, it's about different types of bullying prevention that they're working with the students, and want this to be an opportunity so that parents can hear more about that.
Very good. Thank you. Now to Ms. Horty.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Can you hear? Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple of things happening at Forestdale that I want to share with everyone. There's the PTO is running their pie and cookie dough fundraiser right now. The last day to make the order is October 18th. My understanding is that these things are great to have in your freezer or for Thanksgiving. They will be in time for Thanksgiving. The pies will, so please consider that. I also would like to share with you the Forestdale Halloween gathering. It will be on the 27th at 3 p.m. in the Forestdale cafeteria. Please come for fun. We have crafts, there's candy. There also will be a costume contest for individuals and group. There's a great DJ, pizza. I will be there. Principal Waldi will be there. Ari Taylor will be there. It will be a fun event. I also wanted to mention that Ward 5 is having another event on October 26th called Haunted Woods in Pine Banks. This is still sort of rolling out, so I'm sure you'll all be hearing more about this. This event is meant for older students and adults because it will be scary. So keep an eye out for that. That is a new event that is happening this year. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Now we'll entertain a motion to go into executive session. Motion by Mr. Bernard, seconded by Mr. Gray. Clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummy? Mr. McCarthy? Yes. Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin?
Yes.
Ms. Horty?
Yes.
Mr. Gray? Yes. Mr. Bernard? Yes. Ms. Rose Zeiberg?
Yes.
Okay, that carries unanimously. School committee will now be in executive session. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for all your help this evening.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress. Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
All right, the school committee is back from executive session. We'll entertain any motions of the members. Mr. Bernard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the contract for the Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources. Second. Sorry, I apologize. For Dr. Sarah McLaughlin.
Seconded by Mr. McCarthy. All right, any questions on that? Clerk will call. Do we have Ms. Horty back?
There she is.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm here.
Okay, very good. Okay.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummy? Mr. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin?
Yes.
Ms. Horty?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Bernard?
Yes.
Ms. Rose Zeiberg? Yes.
Okay, that carries unanimously. Now we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oops. Motion by Mr. Gray, seconded by Mr. Bernard. Any questions? Clerk will call the roll.
Mayor Christensen?
Yes.
Mr. Drummy? Mr. McCarthy? Yes. Ms. Spadafora? Ms. Macklin?
Yes.
Ms. Horty?
Yes.
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Bernard?
Yes.
Ms. Rose Zeiberg?
Yes.
Carries unanimously. School committee is hereby adjourned.
Recording stopped.